All right, Kenneth, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm really definitely looking forward to this conversation. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your backgrounds and how you ended up at CoreAVI and Squint AI as well. So yeah, let us know. How did you end up in where you are right now? And then we'll unpack some other areas around AI in just a second and the book that you've written.
Sure. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's see, I joined CoreAVI in 2012. So it was right before CoreAVI, I had worked in another company, but in the same space, right? So I've been in the graphics and compute industry since 2007, right after I graduated from computer science. And what I was doing from the beginning was basically write graphics and compute drivers. So for GPUs. So if you think of AI today, for example, AI is accelerated. It's possible because you can run these algorithms that are very compute intensive on things like GPUs. And the reason you can do that is because you have these pieces of software called drivers that enable you to interact with the GPU. Okay, so what I did for a long time at CoreAVI was write GPU drivers.
Hmm.
That's really how I got into the compute space. And then right around 2012, when AI was picking up again, um, I started to get involved in it because I was very interested in it. And then I went back to school. I got my master's with the specialization in AI, and yeah, been very
Very
interesting.
cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So I don't know if you've seen this, but I saw it recently that an AI flew an F-16 for about 17 hours not too long ago. I don't know if it shot down any balloons, but that's that's how far we've progressed. That's incredible. I didn't know that until recently.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. You know, the F-16 article, I actually saw it yesterday. I I think in the past year, the amounts of changes that we've seen in the AI research space and application space, so not just what people are doing in labs, but just what they're putting out there in the world, has accelerated to the point that it's surprising even us who are in the field. So things like ChatGPT, for example, we never thought we would be here at this point if you asked me a year ago.
It is unbelievable, and that's one of the things that I was going to ask you about. I mean, I've been following this space for quite some time. And I've talked to a number of people who've been very surprised by it, and the vast majority have been very surprised by it. And then you hit a few people who are like, we've been doing this in the labs for forever. It just hasn't been exposed to the public. And so there's that debate there where like, all right, people just saying that, or is that legitimate? Um,
Yeah.
I think my first moment that I was just absolutely stunned was April of last year of 2022 when I started using Dolly, and the idea that I could actually, because I've done some graphic design back in the past, and the idea that I wouldn't have to spend hours or days creating something, and all I needed to do is type in a few words, descriptive words, and it created that, and then you can continue to hone it, um, blew me away. And then all of a sudden, now, of course, with ChatGPT, OpenAI has done a lot. There's a lot of other organizations that are probably going to be in the same space already there, or will be releasing something soon. But for you, this is fairly surprising.
Yeah, and I'll qualify what I mean by that. So I think what you described, that some people are saying, well, we know we've seen this in the labs for a few years. I think it depends on the scale of what we're discussing. So for example, ChatGPT, it's based on a neural network architecture called the transformer. Okay, so transformers have been around for at least I think the first paper released was in 2017, which described the transformer. So 5 years. And ever since then, it's been making progress, right? It's been incrementally um, progressing toward we are today. So we have seen some of these results before. The problem is that the scale we're seeing these things at right now, for example, OpenAI releases ChatGPT, and then you have millions of people interacting with it, and it's able to reply in a way that convinces millions of people that it's doing a good thing. That is what I think is surprising, and we didn't have that scale in a lab, right?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense
Yeah,
too. The scale is incredible, and I know they've early days back in December when I first started playing around with it. Um, there were these prompts that said, hey, we can't handle all of this. But the prompts that I put into it and then eventually got out the results were stunning. And I definitely was surprised because I do a lot of writing, and I had written something around blockchain and crypto and the impact on the legal tech industry. And I was like, all right, let me just throw a few prompts into this thing and see what can produce. And it produces 75% of what I wrote. I don't know what that says about my writing, but it's pretty darn good. And this is just their first iteration on this part of it. I know that they're at 3 and soon 4 coming out soon with GPT. But yeah, so
Because
that's fascinating.
yeah, because what's interesting about these models is that, especially the GPT classes of models, is that we're learning that they get better with scale. So that's another thing that has progress. So the size of the models, the amount of parameters, and the amount of data that they're trained with, that's also changing over the years. And we're learning that the ability of these models to learn patterns and and provide surprising results that even researchers, we don't understand exactly how they're getting there. Um, that is surprising, right? And we're seeing it now, especially because of the scale that we're running these models at.
So great point, and something that brings us to your book. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, what went into this, where your thoughts are on it. But the book is the algorithm plotting against us? Yeah, give me an understanding a little bit about what went into it and then what you're saying within it.
Yeah. So there's a line that I have in the book actually that says, you know, um, essentially the algorithm is not plotting against us, and if it is, it's not personal. It's just gradients, and gradients in these algorithms. This is how they learn. It's a mathematical concept, but it was just a bit of a joke. But the the what I meant with that title, right, is the algorithm plotting against us, is that I could see, especially starting from a few years ago when I started thinking about the book, is that there's a lot of anxiety in society with these new technologies. It's kind of common whenever something transformational happens, right? People are going to be worried. What does this mean to me? How is it going to affect my life? Is it going to, especially with AI or automation, right? Is it going to replace my job? What is the impact it's going to have long term in my life? And there's a lot of fears, not just in the practical sense. So as I said, am I going to lose my job to an AI algorithm? But in a more fictional sense, I think, or more at least long-term sense, which is, are these algorithms going to wake up and take over the world, right? Are they going to build
Sentient, yeah.
Skynet? And that was really what started me on the direction of writing the book, is to settle the conversation a little bit, right? To get to some baseline where we understand what they're doing today, because I think there are areas that we should be concerned about and we should be paying attention to. And the only way to do that is if we understand how they work, right? And I think the public needs some level of literacy when it comes to AI to be able to be part of that conversation. Because I think, like anything, it's not in the extremes. It's not that AI, it's not going to have any impact in your life. You don't have to worry about it. Everything is fine. But it's also not, it's going to destroy society tomorrow on its own. It's a little bit like we can use it to get to benefit us, but we can use it in ways that can harm us, and we're already doing that in some ways, and we need to understand what those are.
So this is one of my favorite topics right now, and it's something I've spent a lot of time on because I've gone to both sides. So many years ago, uh, when you're talking with various corporations, one of the things that they like to say, especially when they're starting to implement and use AI algorithms within whatever forums they're doing that or platforms they're doing it, what they want to do is say, hey, this is very, very helpful, and it's augmented intelligence. So it's basically going to help you do your job better, more efficiently, whatever the case is. But if you look at the natural progression of that, you move in a direction where, okay, it gets more sophisticated, it becomes stronger and more adept at doing things. And at some point in time, and I don't think it's that far off for any one of these industries, it becomes equivalent to what that individual can do. So it doesn't become really augmented anymore. It actually becomes strong enough to do what many people would do. And I would argue, and I don't know if you feel this way or not, so I'll stop in a second, that just using ChatGPT as a thing, You can, some coders, I mean, I've done it for coding when I've done some smart contracts with blockchains. It does a pretty good job with that. Writing articles does a pretty good job with that. Dolly, in terms of developing art for things that I want to create, it does a really good job with that. We're at a point where it's kind of leaped, in my personal opinion, to the extent that it can replace people's jobs now. Do you believe that, or do you think that that's a stretch?
No, I think certain jobs are certainly going to be replaced. I think that's very possible. I think it's just it's what happens with technology, unfortunately. I mean, there's a size a part of the population that always there's certain areas of jobs that are lost. So for example, this is not new with I always like this example where bowling alleys used to have people that return the ball, and that went away too. Assembly lines used to have a lot more people in manufacturing places, right? And then more and more robots were replacing people. I think that's absolutely true. That will happen with AI. But I don't think so. There's two things. First, I think the people that are left by the wayside, I think they should be. That's something that as a society we should be taking care of, and I talk about that in the book as well. It's not like, well, you lost your job, too bad, you can't compete anymore. I think society needs to be able to take care of these people as well, right? We need to be able to to build a future where we can take advantage of AI, but also help the population in the flux, right? That are not able to now retrain and get on this AI wave. The other side of that is the other side of the question is AI going to get so good at doing every job that humans in general are going to be sitting like in a Wall-E type of, the movie
Yes.
world where we're just sitting down and not doing anything. My perspective on that is that I don't think so. I think people are surprisingly adept at changing and at taking advantage of technology. So I think, in my view, it's an opportunity for us to move up the stack and do things now that are more creative, more interesting with the aid of AI, right? We are the ones who have the drive. AI is just doing our bidding. It's the way I look at it. They don't have an agenda to build a world. We are the ones with the agenda. We just need to use them to get to the world that we want to be at.
And I totally agree with certain aspects of what you said, but I'd love to just throw this out there and
Mm-hmm.
see what you think.
Yeah.
So I have a nephew that is extraordinary in terms of music. He can basically listen to a clip for 15 seconds of a song and then sit down at a piano and play the entire song. Like he's that good. He's in probably sophomore, freshman year in college right now, and he's doing um, a degree in music. And one of the things that people had always said was that the creativity will be the last thing that AI touches. It actually seems like creativity is the first thing that it's really starting to hit because, like the art that I was telling you about, now music, and I've played with several different algorithms that actually allow me to produce some classical music that is, from my untrained ear, sounds great. It sounds great. It looks at Mozart and Chopin and basically learns from the models that it's built and then creates brand new music that's never been created before. And it seems fairly sophisticated and it is um, creative. So I wonder if that's an area that is yet that is also targeted by some of this too.
Yes, I think so. I think again, I think it'll affect it. I think it'll change it. I am still optimistic. I don't think it will replace human creators, and I'll tell you why. I think again, if you look at history, some of these conversations were also had when the camera was invented, right? We thought, now that photography is out there, uh, who's going to paint a landscape or a portrait? Because you could always take a picture and it'll look better. I don't think that went away, but I get what you're saying, and I think one of the problems that I think is actually a problem that I don't know have the answer to, but I think we're going to have to figure it out is this again the scale. So, for example, if you're an artist that you're making your living out of paintings and putting them up, on sale on a website, or you're writing compositions of music and expecting people to pay for that. If you now have also to compete with a model that's just generating, these pieces at a rate that you can't compete with, just by the fact that you may not be visible because there's so much of these other productions, I can understand that that may be a problem. I can think of ways that we can deal with that, but yeah, I'm not concerned so much about losing our creativity. I'm concerned about the competition part.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So in this AI-driven future and what it looks like, when we look at two different things, I'm kind of curious about. One would be self-driving cars, and the other would be like the courtrooms. Um, what does that look like in your view?
That's interesting because I actually talk about that in the book. So with the cars, I think that self-driving cars are actually a good thing once we figure that out, right? I think that in principle, having a system that can drive better than a human, I don't think is that. Now, I was going to say I don't think it's that difficult. It is obviously difficult because we're not there yet, but I think in principle it's possible. And the reason for that is that all we're trying to do is avoid objects when you're in a car, right? And as long as you have a vision system and a way to maneuver in a way that you can avoid objects, better than humans. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be better than humans. And I think that has the chance of succeeding. The problem is, and we have to be very careful, that we don't expect these systems to make ethical decisions. Like, if we're going to get into an accident, am I going to crash into a cheap car or a more expensive car because of that's the problem that I think needs to be avoided. It's just avoiding obstacles, right? Not making ethical decisions. That's number one thing that I think these systems have to do. The court systems on the other side, that's a whole different problem. And I don't think that's a good use case for AI, in my opinion. So
why not? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So the reason for that, at least the models that we have today, okay, and I make a case for this in the book, is that the models that we have today in AI that are at the state of the art, these are called neural networks, and they are known as black boxes. And so what that means is that when you give it an input, it gives you an output, but you don't really know how it got from the input to the output. So and one problem with that is that when you are in the court system, one of the fundamental principles of our society is that you can argue your case. But it's a little bit difficult to argue your position if you don't understand how the judge is getting to its decision. Right? You can't fight back a little bit. You can't ask, well, why do you think that? Because we don't know. That's one problem. The other problem is that a lot of these systems are actually built by companies and they are treated as trade secrets. So you can't, even if you wanted to, you couldn't just look at the model and inspect it to figure out how it got to the answer. Was there bias in the data that it was trained with? Was there a glitch in the computation? Why did I get the decision that I got? You can't inspect these models sometimes because you just don't have access to them.
Fascinating. I think the quick tangent to that I'd throw out there is that some of these companies that are doing this right now, or they're not arguing yet in front of judges or juries, but they have immense amounts of data and they're looking at, okay, how did the judge rule on this particular matter over 3 years? And what were the outcomes of that? And they can look at the data from that and help determine, and they can even look at the language that maybe the judge wrote and how they framed things up to be able to better gamify that particular potential outcome that they would have in front of the judge. So we'll see. I mean, you're right. It's all kind of proprietary, although it's not because it's public records, but the algorithms and what they're looking at can be more on the proprietary side. But I think maybe in time that will open up. I guess we'll see. We'll see. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Can I expand a little bit on that? Or?
Sure.
So there were a few cases in the U.S. actually where they used AI in the court systems, for example, to figure out for people who they wanted to figure out whether they should be granted bail or not. Okay, and the system was canceled after, I believe, a year of being in use. And the reason for that is that they found out that in fact there were a lot of decisions that seemed that there were bias in the data towards a certain size of the population. The problem in that case is that you couldn't actually verify what happened, is because those systems were not available to the public to actually investigate. So that's one problem. The other problem that I was trying to get at is that these models, right, when they give you a decision, so as I said, you can't understand how it got to that decision. But the problem, the fundamental problem with that is that with a judge, you can argue. And sometimes a judge can make a decision based on, let me back up a little bit. These models, right, they give you, what people tell you that why they work, they give you an accuracy. They say, well, look at how accurate they are. Okay, they are 90% accurate on a number of cases. But one important aspect that everybody misses when they give you that information is what are the false positives and false negatives. Okay, that's another metric that we look at in AI, right? We have to look at it's called the F1 score, and we look at, so how many of the cases where the bail was denied, for example, was denied because of an incorrect assessment, and how many of the times where it was given bail, those individuals actually went up and actually committed a crime, right? So just because something is accurate over a population doesn't mean that the trade-off between false positive and false negative is very balanced. So that's something else I need to look at, and we don't always discuss that.
Very good point. Okay. No, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
Maybe transitioning into one other area that I'm very curious about your opinions on, and that is sort of the AI alignment problem, which is the way, and you know this, of course, the way we can encode AI systems in a way that's more human-like, more comparable with human values. Are we making progress from your vision on this in this space?
I think we're making some progress in the sense that more people are aware of it now, of the alignment problem, than a few years ago. I don't think a few years ago many people weren't even aware that that was an issue. I don't think there's an active area of research in how to avoid that problem. One of the main issues, for example, with the alignment problem that is not often talked about, is AI in advertisement, for example. That's another case where I talk about in the book that it's that I find a use case for AI that it's not very good right now, and that's because in cases where recommender systems, like for example when you're in a streaming platform, it recommends the next thing you should watch or the next thing you should buy. Those algorithms, the way they work is that they're trying to figure out what it is that makes you tick, basically, right?
Right.
You become a variable in that system. And what they do is they try to maximize some reward. And the reward is getting you either to buy more products or to spend more time on the platform. That is an alignment problem, because your goal in life is not to spend, the whole day watching TV, even if that's what you end up doing. That's not your actual goal in life. But the algorithm's goal is not aligned with your well-being. But algorithms are incredibly good at maximizing functions. And when you become part of that function, I think is a problem. But it's not talked about, right? Because when you think of alignment problem, you think of like the famous examples of like, maybe we want an algorithm to come up with the paperclip example, right? Like, and then it turns the whole world into a paperclip machine or something like that, which is funny, and it's an exaggerated case, but there are very real cases that are happening today that no one is talking about, like advertising.
Okay, no, that's very important to hear about. So maybe the last question or thought that I want to bring up is it's sort of on the edge of this, but I think it actually progresses well, as we discussed in the beginning, where there's a lot of people may not believe that AI is going to really impact much at all. And then we got to the middle, which is I think where you kind of sit on this, where it's definitely going to impact people. It's going to have an effect, but it's not going to take over the world per se. And then the last part that we have not touched is those people that believe that it's going to destroy the world, right? And that's fringy, but recently I saw something that was a little eye-opening and I wasn't so sure. And then, of course, whether you like him or you don't, Elon Musk even spoke about it. Do you know the name? I think it's Eliezer
Yes,
Yudkowsky.
yes,
Okay.
yes, I know.
So just in case people have not heard of him before, he's been around for a long time. He's an AI researcher, focuses on friendly AI, so to speak. But most recently, he was on a podcast and he described kind of the end of times. In other words, this idea of AI alignment that we just spoke about is not in alignment. And we're at a point where, as you described earlier, AI can kind of do things in the background and no one knows what's happening. So if an AI were able to get to the sentient moment where it can replicate on its own and develop better AI that humans are not developing, it's able to do things that are probably horrible if it wanted to go down that road. What are your thoughts on that space? Is that just ridiculous? And he actually talked about end of times for human existence being anywhere from 3 years to 16 years away, which is, again, probably too fringy, but something that's come a little bit more into focus. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have been reading his blog for a long time, and I like him. I think, I think he has very interesting points. I am less pessimistic than he is. I think he's a bit pessimistic on the subject. My take on it is that we're not that far into that world yet, right? My whole point when I say that I don't think it's going to take over the world is because it can't right now, and I think we have a chance to have a say in it as the public. I think the only way it can get into that case, because it's not sentient right now and it doesn't have the power to become sentient right now, the only way it could get there is if we do it, right? If we evolve it into that point and we give it control over our lives where it runs everything, and then we don't even know how to stop it. I think that's why it's important for the public to understand how these systems work so that we make it work for us and not, not replace us, essentially, not take over our world. That's the point of the book. It's that I'm not saying that it could never get there. I'm saying that if it gets there, it's because we didn't stop it and we didn't do enough.
So, and it's so amazing that what you're going through, but it goes back to what you described in the very beginning, the GPUs. And
Mhm.
so what I think he mentioned was that there are, let's say, hedge funds or organizations that are private that sit in the background that are throwing, let's say, $1 billion, and they're able to get whatever amount of GPUs and the drivers connected in such that they have so much power. And then they have people that are building the algorithms that can get it there. That was the part that I was like, wow, okay, I get, because people are trying to build these things for a particular reason or whatever it is, and they're not releasing it. So no one knows it's happening. So if you have all these groups that are doing that around the world, there is a potential for something to go awry if there's not a commonality around philosophies and ethics and to your points, right? And so I think that's the part that it's going to be interesting as we go over, progress in the next several years to beyond.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that's why we need to pay attention to that. That's why I think, for to give you an example, I think Chat GPT, as amazing as it is from a research perspective, I think deploying it en masse the way we're doing it right now is a bit irresponsible because we don't know how people. I mean, some people are treating it as a friend, as a therapist, and that is a problem. Um,
Yes.
so so I agree. I'm not. I'm in the middle. I'm not an extreme optimist that I don't think anything wrong can come out of it. I think the contrary, but I also don't think that it's all over and we can't do anything about it.
No, I appreciate that perspective. I think I kind of fall in the middle myself, maybe leaning a little bit towards the beginning was always like, no, this is not going to be too much, but now it seems like it's definitely shifting a tad. So, Ken, any other thing that you'd like to bring up today? And I'd love to underline the fact that the book out?
The book is out on pre-order. It will be out on May 1st, but you can get it on Amazon. And the website Working Fires website. It's a publisher, workingfires.org. Yeah, it's we are working hard on trying to to get the word out there, right? To educate the public a little bit. On the Squint side, you did ask me about Squint, which is it's a company that we're starting. It's about actually making AI responsible, trying to understand how it's explaining some of the decisions that it's making. So there are people that are working on the other side of things to to get control of these algorithms as opposed to just let them run wild.
Fantastic. That's a good thing. Well, Ken, thank you so much. The book is the algorithm plotting against us? Obviously, I'm pre-order right now, but thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.